Hey YouTube, Mr. Terry back here once again for another History Teacher Reacts video. Today I'm going to be watching another music video from the band Sabaton. Sorry if I'm still pronouncing that wrong. But yeah, we're going to be checking this out today. Now, this is the second video that I have watched from them. The first one was Bismarck. And kind of the only reason I was thinking about even reviewing a music video is, first off, it was heavily recommended all over YouTube comments and Discord and things like that. But then I was told that these guys do a lot of songs with historical themes or about historical events or inspired by them. So I thought, all right, I'll give it a shot. So I did that with Bismarck and thought it was great. So I definitely thought of doing another video of theirs. Then I found out that it's common that with these music videos, they also release like a history lesson video on the topic that they used for their song. So I looked up, listed their videos, and I saw this one. This song is Fields of Verdun, so I'm assuming it's about the Battle of Verdun in World War I. Then I saw that they did have like an additional like history video or something like that to go along with it. So I thought today we would check out the music video. And then go ahead and check out their little history video and see what all that's about. So I love the idea of it. That's pretty cool of, having this. And then, if somebody doesn't necessarily know the content or the context of what's going on with the video, they can also get, a little history lesson there. So I thought we'd check out both of those for this time right here. Okay, before we get started, though, if you do like the original video and their content, make sure you go to the link that I'll have in the description that will link you to the original page, so you can give them a like and subscribe. Make sure you give the real content creators there the support and that they deserve. So that will be in the descriptions. Encourage you to do that if you liked this. All right, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Again, this is Fields of Verdun. Let's rock. Trench warfare. In a bluish suit, probably French. They'd be going nuts in those trenches. Can't blame them. Alright, we'll just go right into the riff. Last video there, I was really impressed with the quality, the production quality. I enabled captions so we can maybe see some of the lyrics. The Battle of Verdun might have been the longest battle of World War I. I'm not positive, but I want to say that. Dude, you gotta love the singer. He's a beast. Constant bombardment. Ooh. Shying away from the gore for a music video, huh? So yeah, it looks like they're going, right to trench warfare, which is a key element of what people usually think about when they talk about how World War I was fought, right? Remember, World War I included a bunch of new technologies that basically created the stalemate. Trench warfare is something that has gone on forever in the history of military war. It's been useful before, right? It's about protecting yourselves and then eventually making some kind of charge, right? Now, up until World War One, again, that was very effective. Now, one of the couple big changes that changed warfare were a couple of inventions. One of the maybe most important ones was the machine gun. Right before World War One, the automatic weapons were not really a thing yet, and World War One was one of the first things that really brought that in. And as you can tell, that is going to make a big impact on trench warfare because when you have two sides that have machine guns, charges are very, very risky and will likely cause a ton of casualties. So you have these machine gun nests that are just pointed at each other, and you're just going to get bunkered down. And the song is kind of talking about that, how they're lining up one by one and they're falling, and you're like trapped and all that. And that's very true of what trench warfare was like.
Fields of execution turn to wasteland from the grass. Thou shalt go no further, it was said they shall not pass. The spirit of resistance and the madness of the war. So go ahead.
A lot of madness on World War I, huh? Yeah, then eventually you would charge the other person's trench, and then you got this like hand-to-hand stuff with bayonets and knives and some brutal close-up combat going. Is that how many actual days were in Verdun? I don't know the exact date. Okay, so yeah, Battle of Verdun lasted 303 days, longest active battle in history. Oh, I didn't know it went actually. It compares to the other wars as far as length goes. It was one of the bloodiest battles of the Great War with over 700,000 casualties. That's one of the crazy things about World War One. When you study the war, one thing you don't find, especially here in the Western Front where this is a lot of movement, right? So you'll have like these incredible amount of casualties, but very little ground sometimes ever made. You know what I mean? And that's, again, what makes this war so different than other wars. I mean, it really doesn't even compare to World War II at all, which saw a lot more movement. World War I was just, again, like a stalemate with just years of people just dying and dying and dying, eventually by the millions. And yeah, I can't imagine, something this long and deadly happening, Yeah. Crazy, huh? The battle became a strong symbol for French resistance, along with the words, one does not pass. Right. Yeah, being able to hold their ground. The French, were holding their ground and had to do that as they were trying to protect their homeland. So, yeah, I mean, you can't allow them to pass. You allow them to pass, right? Then your country falls. You don't have anywhere to fall back into because you're already on the brink. They shall not pass. Okay. Yeah, I mean, kind of sums up trench warfare and that kind of stuff, and kind of, I guess, the emotion of it and the violence of it. They definitely, wanted to bring the side of just the gory details of trench warfare, which is just unbelievable. I mean, it was chaotic because you never know when someone could die. You're never, even though you're in a trench, you're never truly protected. And they talk about in the early part of the video, all the artillery shells, right? And a lot of times it was just, for so many people, just waiting for that artillery shell to land in your trench, and then you're blown up, right? And that's and the amount of times that happened was incredible. And having to see that, right, with the soldiers that you, especially over the months and years, come to grow so close with, it's just, you drop one by one until you're gone or they're gone. So yeah, the trench warfare, people also say, changed how we think about war, right? The history of war had been one of these glorious cavalry charges and stuff like that, with success and movement. And you know how they have that famous saying, World War One, or back then, you're right, it was going to be the war to end all wars. We know that's not true. But one thing I've heard, and I think I agree with, is World War One was the war to change all wars. War will never be seen the same, because what glory is there, right, in sitting in a trench waiting to get blown up after years and years with no seeming success throughout the process, right? So I think that phrase, that war will never, it'll be the war to change all wars, has some truth to it for sure. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump over to their little history video that they did about Verdun. I'm interested to see what they got, what do they talk about, and that sort of thing. And I think you can tell if these guys are really into history and what, hopefully, maybe their purpose is in doing these things. Are they trying to highlight, these events to make sure they don't get forgotten in history? Let's go ahead and check that out here, okay? All right, here we go.
The Battle of Verdun was the longest battle of the First World War, lasting over 300 days. And yet, the attacking German army was unable to break through that symbol of French national pride.
And our song Fields of Verdun from our
He's a singer, then?
album, The Great War,
yeah, looks
is
like
about that battle and the French slogan of courage.
I was told they're Swedish.
They shall not pass.
Is that right?
I'm Indy
I love this
Nidell.
idea, though.
And I'm Joachim from Sabaton, and this is Sabaton history.
I did say it right.
Now, he's going to tell you a little bit about the song
does
and
that
the
mean,
album,
by
but
the way,
I'm going to
their
give
band
you a
name?
little Verdun history lesson.
What do we got?
In late 1915, German Army Chief of Staff Erich von Falkenhayn was looking up and down the map of the Western Front. It had been more than a year since the stalemate and trench warfare had begun there. This is during the First World War. The home front was already suffering under the naval blockade, and he feared a war of attrition that the German Empire could only lose. He needed to go on the offensive.
Right.
To Falkenhayn.
Yeah, this war of attrition is not working, right? It's not working because even if you're... War of attrition is basically where you just try to eliminate the enemy, right? You try to just as many casualties as possible. But with that, I mean, both sides are having so many casualties and no success is happening. So you could see from the German perspective, they need to try to go on an offensive. You got to make up ground here. Otherwise, you're just slowly bleeding out. So that's setting the stage here for the Battle of Verdun. All right, let's see what they got.
Could only lose. He needed to go on the offensive. To Falkenhayn, the weakest point of the Western Front was the British sector, and attacking at Artois could, he believed, lead to a decisive breakthrough that would collapse the whole Western Front. But he'd learned the hard way that without eliminating or at least tying down the French beforehand, the defense would be too strong. So, to deliver the blow in the north, he would attack at a place further south that would draw in as many French forces as possible. It must be a place the enemy could not afford to lose for strategic or propagandistic purposes, and would thus fight until wiped out. Such a place was Verdun. Verdun was not Falkenhayn's first choice, since it was a heavily fortified area. But it was also a commanding location. By capturing the heights east of the River Meuse and loading them with artillery, the Germans could constantly threaten the city and the local defenses, forcing the French to continuously attack the German defenses.
Okay.
The French would be tied down, and if they lost badly, the British would be forced to intervene. In the best case, they would hastily execute an offensive at the Somme, suffer heavy casualties as well, and open themselves up for a decisive German counterattack. Falkenhayn...
So it sounds like the Germans here are really hoping for a series of things to happen, right? That the French will come drawn out, and then the British will then come to their aid and move some of their positions, thus allowing the Germans to take the British positions. Sounds like they're really, it's a little bit risky here. There's a series of dominoes, it looks like, that have to fall here for this to work.
As well, and opened themselves up for a decisive German counterattack. Falkenhayn concluded that if Verdun was successful, there would be peace before the summer of 1916.
It's pretty ambitious.
The key to the attack was heavy artillery. Total destruction, then attack battalions and pioneers storming the hills in a wedge toward the mighty fortress of Douaumont, taking the remnants of the other fortresses that were surely destroyed by the heavy bombardment. Okay. Preparations were made over the winter, massing artillery pieces of all calibers and millions of shells. The attack was planned for February once the weather cleared. On the 21st of February, the bad weather finally cleared, and German aircraft and observation balloons hit the skies. At 7:12 a.m. came the order to attack. The largest concentration of guns in history to this point opened up in a violent concert, described by witnesses as the Symphony of the Devil. Even in the
Symphony of the Devil, like you have the largest, what did it say, concentration of basically weaponry that's about to fire here. The guns are like the musical instruments, right? The Symphony of the Devil. It's a pretty brilliant name.
Vosges, near the Swiss border, could be heard the thunder of the German guns. In an intensity never seen before, the barrage destroyed whole forests, blowing trees meters high into the air and raining stones and earth on the poor souls on the ground. Some soldiers were simply obliterated, torn apart by the force of the guns. Others were buried alive deep in their trenches or bunkers. Then the German combat troops emerged from the saps with grenades, wire cutters, and flamethrowers. With the advantage of surprise, they stormed the first French lines. Through ice, rain, and snow, the soldiers fought as rifle shots and grenades burst in their midst. Trench after trench, the Germans gained a foothold, despite fierce resistance from well-camouflaged French machine guns and blockhouses. Thing is, for French Army Chief of Staff Joseph Joffre,
learning so much here.
Verdun wasn't that important, at least militarily. If the Germans could not be held on the east bank of the Meuse, the French would retreat and build new positions on the western bank. This was what Falkenhayn feared. But Aristide Briand made it
I mean, what they're talking about, it doesn't seem like the positioning, the starting positioning is even necessarily that good, because the French are already across the river, and then all they would do is go behind it, thus making it, again, then it would be hard for the Germans, because then you'd have to try to cross the river while the French have defended themselves on the other side. So I'm wondering at this moment, why do this then?
This was what Falkenhayn feared, but Aristide Briand made it perfectly clear that losing Verdun was not acceptable. Not only would the psychological effect be disastrous for the French public, it would undermine trust in the current government.
It's like more important to the French than the Germans almost.
So would Joffre. So giving up Verdun was out of the question. This is exactly what Falkenhayn had hoped for. However, though the Germans advanced the first weeks, it was not nearly as far as Falkenhayn had calculated, and the French had brought in reserves and Philippe Pétain to lead the men. The most important heights were still far away and under French control, and taking the fortress of Douaumont was the key to those heights. Unlike the big fortresses in Belgium that had quickly fallen to modern heavy artillery at the beginning of the war, the French had used a stronger special concrete for Douaumont that just would not break.
Can we go and appreciate how cool this skull thing is right here? What is that? That's crazy. I mean, the other stuff's cool too, but what is that? Anybody know? Let me know.
And the fortress soon seemed like an island in an ocean of fire and shrapnel. Small platoons of German soldiers that crept towards the fortress in early March found that it was actually mostly empty. And the strongest fortress of Europe was thus taken by a German officer with a pistol and a lot of guts. Fort Douaumont is for many the symbol of the Battle of Verdun. The Germans celebrated its fall, but Douaumont was a trap for the men inside. Every direct artillery
got the
hit
Holy
put out the
Grail back
lights,
there,
and the men cowered
to
in
that
darkness for
weird skull
days,
thing.
living in their own waste, sharing their food with rats and lice, while the stench of the dead and the screams of the wounded haunted the long corridors.
People talk about how there's this stench of war, right? Somebody that's been in a very bloody conflict might tell you about, the stench of war, where it's all of these different elements combined, which is, it's a mix. There's like the gunpowder, and then of course the rotting flesh, and the organic, decomposition, and all these different elements. That was awful. Now, of course, these tragic conditions made disease rampant, right? Rats are all over the place, getting in these germs, feasting on all the, basically the dead flesh. It's also why World War I helped usher and spread the influenza, right? Which the outbreak in this time was possibly maybe the biggest disease epidemic since the plague, probably killing millions across the world. But the conditions actually in the trenches, just horrifying.
But this was actually still better than soldiers outside the fortress walls had to endure in the meat grinder that was Verdun. The French just had one supply road out of range of German artillery. Only
That's
trucks
tough.
for military purposes were allowed to use that road, and soon over 3,000 trucks a day were bringing men, ammunition, and supplies up the road. If one broke down, it was simply pushed off the road, which became known as the Voie Sacrée, the Holy Road. The German offensive began to drastically lose speed.
Lose that, you're
the
done.
whole area of Verdun had become a maze of trenches and shell holes where death was always near.
How do you get in and out of that?
Literally.
Can't.
This is only an area of 30 square kilometers, and the death toll grew to the hundreds of thousands.
So you're talking, what they say, 700,000 people died at Verdun over 30 square kilometers. Wow.
30 square kilometers, and the death toll grew to the hundreds of thousands. The name Verdun became synonymous with the mechanized death of the First World War. But it really bound the French together. Pétain had ordered a new rotation system where no soldier was supposed to stay longer than 10 days in the front lines before being rotated out. This meant most soldiers in the French army had gone through Verdun.
I get why you would do that, to help the psychology, right, of the soldiers. I wonder, though, if that made intelligence of the area difficult, because if you're there for 10 days, by the time you're leaving, you're getting an idea of the enemy and what this is like, and then you have a new people come in, and they have to figure that out. I wonder if there's a pro and con element to having that troop rotation, especially a troop rotation that's fairly short.
By April, the lack of progress was turning the whole idea of the Battle of Verdun into a farce. The more reserves Falkenhayn committed to the operation, the fewer he had ready for the real attack against the British. So Falkenhayn had to choose: stop the offensive and defend the gains that were made, or keep going with the offensive, but with all available forces. Half measures were now unacceptable.
Risky. Dice roll, right?
He would keep up the offensive.
Okay.
As June arrives, Falkenhayn officially declared...
I mean, I guess you go with it, even though, again, we're sitting here talking about lives and just talking about as numbers, and there's that human element, and this from the strategic point of view. It's like this was meant to be an offensive. What do you really gain by, okay, you gained a little bit of territory and hold on to it? Why? To wait until the other side rebuilds and counterattacks? So it makes sense from a strategic point of view. But again, you're talking about numbers in battle that we had never seen in human history, and having to use those to make decisions, that's tough.
declares bleeding dry. As June arrives, Falkenhayn officially declares bleeding dry as the main aim of the offensive. But bad news now also arrives. Russian General Alexei Brusilov launches his offensive on the Eastern Front. It is a spectacular success, and Germany's ally Austria-Hungary might
Two
be
fronts,
knocked
right?
out of the war. German reinforcements bound for Verdun must instead head east immediately. And more bad news, the French now have air superiority in the west thanks to the new Newport 11 planes.
Back to the Russia thing. You remember the plan all along was for the Germans was at least hoping that they could deal with France before Russia could really mobilize and pose a serious threat. And you're seeing here that no, that's not the case. So that Germany is now having to spread themselves on two fronts. You know, one of the what ifs about World War I is what if Germany did not have to fight two fronts? Would the outcome potentially be different? There's probably a case for that, right? Okay, so they're now. I don't want to just gloss over the fact of the air war. Now, remember, this is maybe the first ever war that actually used air technology. Now, airplanes, remember, are very new. I mean, honestly, the plane itself had been invented for like less than 10 years. The Wright brothers, right, in the first decade of the 1900s. And you saw the thing was a little glider that would fly for a few seconds, right? Look how far it's come. But it's important to also note that in World War I, don't try to equate the strength of air warfare in World War I and World War II, because World War I is very, very different. In fact, most of the what the air forces were used for was reconnaissance. A lot of the planes weren't strong enough and big enough to be like bombers or anything like that, so they're used for reconnaissance. And eventually, since both sides are going to have planes, you started to get the first dogfights or aerial battles, and that's what those planes would be used for. Now, of course, in World War II, it completely changes, right, with the bombers that they have. But World War I didn't quite have that. So this is another one of the things that was introduced in World War I was the air war. And it adapted a lot during the war, and of course adapts a lot in the next 30 years between this moment and World War II. But remember how young of a technology this is. All right, let's let them talk real quick about air
The
superiority.
French now have air superiority in the west thanks to the new Newport 11 planes and air-to-air Lancier rockets. Time seems to be running out for a German victory at Verdun. Falkenhayn launches what he hopes is the final attack towards Fort Vaux and the heights around the village of Fleury. On the 7th of June, Fort Vaux falls. A victory for the Germans for sure. But is this the turning point at Verdun? Not quite, for Fort Souville still stands in the way of victory, and this the Germans cannot take. June marks the limit of their advance at Verdun. On June 23rd, French General Robert Nivelle gives his famous order, "Vous ne les laisserez pas passer, mes camarades," which was later shortened to "Ils ne passeront pas." They will not pass. And indeed, they do not. The French hold out in June. And on July the 1st, the British relief attack begins at the Somme. The pressure there forces German reserves away from Verdun to the north. With the Russians still advancing in the east, there are no options for Falkenhayn available. He must dig in at Verdun as the three largest battles in history to this point all rage simultaneously.
Jeez.
But by August, Pétain has a 7-to-1 advantage in artillery, and the German positions are pounded day and night. And as if things aren't bad enough, Romania joins the Allies. A new front and hundreds of thousands of new enemies emerge overnight for the Germans. Falkenhayn has lost the confidence of his Kaiser and then loses his job. Paul von Hindenburg and Erich Ludendorff take over running the German army. That, of course, does not mean that the battle is simply over, but it is France's turn to attack. Pétain brings in two 40-centimeter caliber railway guns to fire 900-kilo shells. That's around a ton.
Crap.
Railway guns
is
to
that where
fire
it comes out of?
900-kilo
Look
shells.
at that.
That's around a...
Look at that thing. How do you even launch something like that? Okay, he's saying something. I wanted to hear this.
Caliber railway guns to fire 900-kilo shells. That's around a ton each on Fort Douaumont, which finally
you have to have
cracks.
rail guns on basically
8
trains
months
because you
after
can't
its
move
fall,
something that
the
heavy.
French retake the fort
on train
in
tracks.
early November, and their counterattack is relentless. What the Germans captured over months of fighting, the French now retake in mere hours. By the end of 1916, the front lines are nearly back where they were in February. For a few kilometers of land, hundreds of thousands of men have died. The Battle of Verdun lasted 303 days and nights.
Almost a
Estimates
year.
of the total casualties run as high as 1 million men, though it was likely closer to 700,000. But still, it was the longest
Unbelievable either
battle
way.
of the First World War. And for many of the war's soldiers, it was the epitome of brutal, mechanized modern war. Many veterans would later remember Verdun by its smell, the mixture of gas, bodies that lay for months unburied, and the mass graves that were churned up by artillery fire. Corpses that laid for months in the dead zones of no man's land were mummified, the faces frozen in their final expression before death. The soldiers advancing into the forward trenches often had to stomp over the corpses and body parts of their dead comrades. Only the flies and rats thrived at Verdun.
You're fighting in the grave of your army. Like, literally, you're fighting in their grave. And it doesn't matter if you bury them because they get churned back up from just the movement of war and the artillery and all that. You're fighting in, the graveyard of your enemy. And very likely, you're fighting in your own grave, your own future grave. Right? Because there's no movement. You just stay there. Stay in place.
In 1916. Before Joachim talks about the song, I would like to spoil the moment with a side note. It has been accepted history for a century that Falkenhayn's intention was to bleed France dry at Verdun, but this may not be the case. Falkenhayn claimed that this was his plan from the get-go, and he wrote about it in his 1915 Christmas memorandum to the Kaiser. However, the Kaiser never mentioned such a memorandum, and there's no actual evidence that it ever existed. Falkenhayn may well have made all of this up as an excuse after the fact to explain away his failure. I did a whole episode about the Falkenhayn controversy on the Great War channel. The link is in the description. And now,
That'd be cool to check
back
out.
to Sabaton.
Okay.
Okay, so new album, bunch of new songs. Now, how was it writing Fields of Verdun specifically?
Oh, to be honest, that was one of the harder ones.
Yeah?
We didn't know where to start, from which angle to cover it. I mean, we were stuck in a mountain of information, but then we just thought, well,
Yeah, how do you make a song?
let's just
a 2-3
start and
minute
see
song on that.
where all this info that we have now read takes us. And that actually started to work out, you know.
Now, this album, The Great War, all of the songs have to do with the First World War.
Yes.
But
Oh,
is
really?
it a
The whole
concept
album on
album
World War
like
One?
Tommy, where you have to follow a story? Or...
Oh, yes and no. Let's say it's got a red thread you got to follow or something.
Okay.
All events covered on the album
Yeah.
happened during the Great War.
Yeah.
But they're not chronological ordered.
Okay, so it's a Great
Okay.
War theme without being the Great War concept.
Yeah.
Like if Julio Iglesias, and he does an album, and you know all the songs are about love, so he's got a theme.
Exactly,
He's
yeah.
got a theme on his
Yeah.
album.
Well, that's a good
Just-
name for it, a theme
just
album,
like
because it's not
that.
a true concept where we follow it from the beginning to the end.
Because of this particular part of that theme album, you're going to be doing a few things in Verdun this spring and summer, yeah?
Yes, but you weren't supposed to say that because that's a secret. You never heard that shit.
You never heard that.
Do
We could
what?
cut it out if you really want.
No,
But-
never.
A show there?
Never.
This is
Okay.
live.
Yes, this is wow, we're going live.
Yeah.
Hi, Mom. For now, here is a few seconds of some of this unreleased music from the song Fields of Verdun from the album The Great War.
Fields of execution turn to wasteland from the grass. Thou shalt go no further.
Man, you got like
Said
the
Oh,
they shall not
quality of
pass.
like a war movie
And
here.
that's it for today.
But we'll see you next time and every time on Sabaton History.
All right, everyone, that's it for today. Remember to subscribe to Sabaton History, but also the regular Sabaton channel. Also, check out World War II and Time Ghost. If you want to see more videos like this, there's a playlist, cool stuff, you want to see it. And also, there's a chance for you to get a special edition of our upcoming album, The Great War. If you go and join us on Patreon. So do that, and do that now! Bye-bye.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I love that they added that. That was a very, very good recap of Verdun. As far as this second video here of teaching, man, I learned a ton about it from that. That was crazy, especially the the intentions of it, and what the what were the actual plans and hopeful outcomes and things like that of the battle. I'd known it was one of the bloodiest battles and maybe the longest and all that, but yeah, a lot of the strategy specifically. I didn't know there was much of this other controversy too about in the way, because obviously it's a failure for the Germans in the long run. A controversy though about what the intentions were going to be from the administrative point of view. But yeah, that was good. Yeah, well, that was great. I think they did an excellent job covering things, and then with the video itself, very well done. I was very impressed and glad to go ahead and check this out. So, like the singer said at the end, if you really liked what they were doing there, make sure you go support those guys. That is very important to do that. So you give them support, and hopefully they can make more content, right? They can make more content. Again, I also thank you for joining me here today, letting me go ahead and sharing this with me. To check out something like this was very, very cool. Yeah, if you are into this idea of kind of history teacher, checking out history videos and history stuff, make sure to subscribe if you haven't. If you would especially like to be part of the live premieres, which is often what I do with these videos, might be a good idea to enable the notifications so you can see when those actually happen, so you don't miss it. So we can all watch it together and have a discussion, as it goes on. Other ways you can interact with this channel. If you have ideas or comments, I encourage you to put them into the comments section. If you have anything you'd like to add about the Battle of Verdun, we can make that a great, place to share information about that. You can also join the Discord that we currently have to join in other discussions. And I appreciate that. Again, thank you for your support by liking, subscribing. If you would like to support the channel in another way, you can also join the Patreon that has recently been launched. A link to that will also be in the description to go along with the original music video here, as well as a link to the Discord. All right, again, I thank you for joining me. I hope to see you very soon, and we'll see you then.